Okay, so now I'm going to move on to the first part of actually talking about my code. So before I get into the details, I kind of want to give an overview of how my code is structured because I feel like that helps just give some context. So game start, you just set everything up, window size, caption name, whatever. Load all resources as we start the game scene. I only have one scene in the entire game, in the entire loop of the game. There's no separate attractor scene and play scene. It's all the same scene. So we create this game scene and we initialize. Here's setting up all the collisions and everything, but the main kind of meat of my game is the game manager. So it is the only, besides the factories, it is the only singleton. And yeah, we start with this game initialize. So this is kind of where we create all the other entities. Up top are the different strategy patterns for doing things in the game manager. But right here is where I'm creating everything else. So I have the player manager, the entity manager, wave manager, score manager. Obviously you can see these. These constructors don't do much. The main stuff is calling these initialize and different functions down here. And everything kind of goes from there. So I just wanted to give that as kind of how my code is set up. Once again, none of these managers are singletons. They are passed around with pointers. So there's a lot of pointer passing. It's not necessarily the cleanest, but that's kind of the approach that I went with. So I guess the first thing, as I'm looking through the grading checklist, I was going to start with showing off the strategy pattern. So an easy one that we started with was the blaster. I actually use strategy patterns like everywhere. I really like them. But okay, so for the blaster, it's a game object, but in the update, there's no update, right? It's not that the blaster is not checking, every frame which strategy pattern it's using. Instead, it just has these different functions: move left, move right, move up, move down, that someone else tells it to do. In the movement for the blaster, just to go over that really quickly, we have the top bound, bottom down, right bound, which is just set right when the blaster is created at the beginning. And these move up, move down, move left have the different direction. You set the position based on those directions, and you call movement clamp, which is this clamp to the bounds, and you set the sprite. So pretty simple. We have fire down here as well. If can fire, create the bullet. So how is it actually moving? That's obviously where the strategy pattern comes in. Back in the game manager, I guess I want to show where these are called. So back in the game manager, the player manager creates a player controller. So there's always this player controller in the scene that's just sitting there, and its only job is to tell the blaster what to do. So we have a player controller that we create. When you create the player controller, it creates the 3 different strategy patterns. So I actually have 3. There's AI strategy, keyboard strategy, and then frozen strategy. So what do these look like? Here is the base class, controller mode. So all of the other ones are derived from controller mode, and this is an abstract class because it has the virtual function, and you can't instantiate it. So controller mode, the only function that it has is movement update. For the keyboard, starting with that, we have our different keys associated here, and in the movement update here, this is where we have the keyboard input. So if left is pressed, we call blaster move left, blaster move right, blaster fire. One thing I will say is that this mode is given the blaster instance from the get-go. So I was going to go over this a bit later, but the blaster factory, it just, since we only ever have one blaster in the game, it just creates one blaster. And so I can just get that blaster from the blaster factory right at the beginning when I set up this controller mode. And now I just have access to that blaster. So for the entire game, this mode has access to that blaster, and I can move it around as needed. If we go to the AI controller mode, if you recall, mine was a bit crazy. It is not optimal. I actually have a strategy pattern within this strategy pattern. So, right. How to describe this? AI move direction is the base class strategy for AI movement. And then the different derived concrete patterns of that are stop, left, right, up, left. You can see these different ones. And they just do what they say. So this is making the blaster move right and down. This one is making the blaster move left and up, etc. So these are the different concrete strategies for the controller mode concrete strategy. And what happens in the movement update function of the controller mode is I have kind of a counter that I count up to, and every time it reaches 60, it changes direction. So this is my attempt at getting kind of that random movement. And this change direction function is a switch. So we have random for case 0. The current move direction is the P stop concrete strategy, or left or right or up, down right, upright, etc. And then in the movement update, all I'm doing is calling move on that concrete strategy, and I'm always constantly calling fire, and obviously since the blaster is only allowed to fire one at a time, it still only fires one bullet at a time. So that is the AI movement. Once again, I had the base class for controller mode. AI controller mode is derived from that. It's a concrete strategy for that. And then the keyboard controller is another concrete strategy derived from controller mode. The last one is frozen controller mode, which literally does nothing. There's nothing in the movement update. That's when I want the player to just be frozen. I do that during the mushroom regeneration. Right, so that is a strategy pattern. I'm also going to go over the sound manager strategy pattern really quick. So if we go to sound manager, sound mode is the base class. So here we have sound mode. Sound update, it's abstract. As you can see, it's virtual void, equals 0. You can't instantiate it. The two concrete strategies I have for it are sound mode on. If you go to the sound update here, it's overridden, and it actually calls the sound. So you pass it a pointer to the sound manager, and then you call the sound manager. You actually tell the sound manager, hey, I'm on, process my sounds every frame. I'll go over this more later. The process sounds is part of the command pattern, but just wanted to show that this is actually doing something. The muted concrete strategy does nothing, right? So there's just nothing in that body of that, so you don't do anything. So in my sound manager, I actually don't do it here because the sound manager is not a game object, so it doesn't have an update. But in my game manager, which has a pointer to my sound manager, in the update for that, because it is a game object as well, I call my sound manager sound update. So if you go to sound update, I'm doing the current sound mode sound update. So this, if I set the sound on, it gets set to the on concrete strategy. Or if I set it muted, it gets set to the muted concrete strategy. And once again, these were created in the sound manager. In the initialize, not the constructor. So in the initialize, I created these sound on and sound muted. I delete them in the destructor. But in the sound update, sound manager, sound update, I call the different mode updates. So when it's muted, it doesn't do anything, and when it's on, it does actually process the sounds. So I have strategy patterns kind of all over the place. I don't want to harp too much on them. I guess another instance that I have is for the spawners. For instance, like let's say for one of the waves, scorpion spawning was off. What happens when you initialize the wave settings is this my scorpion spawn check is a type of this base class. So scorpion spawn check is the base. The strategy, the abstract class, and then we have active and inactive. So once again, the inactive does nothing, and the body of the active actually starts the timer. So when you initialize those wave settings, you set it to either one of those concrete strategy patterns, and you set that timer at the beginning of the wave if it's going to be spawning frequently, or you just don't do anything and it's off for the entire time. Right, and for the flea, I guess that's a little bit more interesting because let's say the flea is off for the round, but for the wave, but you destroy a mushroom. So if we go to mushroom bullet hit, and I remove the mushroom from the field, I subtract from the total mushroom count. I check if that column and row is in the player area, and then I say, hey, flea spawner, which I have a pointer to this in the grid manager. Hey, flea spawner, let's check if I should spawn a new flea. I do that every wave, even if it's not, the fleas aren't even active. But what I do in that check spawn